Even Monk to his face since his second year at Harrow, when he had given Evelyn Leighton, Viscount Marlowe, aforementioned bully, a drubbing so fierce that molars, spit and blood had been flung about the schoolyard in a 10-foot radius. It was the one time in his life he had not fainted at the sight of blood, so distraught was he. Never mind that Marlowe was twice his size and a year older. Never mind he'd been suspended for the rest of the term, banished to one of his guardian's country estates, without the company of anyone but the staff. Something inside of him had burst after one of Marlowe's infamous cuffs to his neck, and an uninspired limerick that had rhymed Algernon with hard-on. He jumped upon Marlowe in a frenzied whirl of arms and legs, spouting a litany of curses so foul even Sebastian, already world-weary at age 10, had gasped in astonishment. He'd had to be pulled off Marlowe's stunned, nearly unconscious form by the combined efforts of 2 instructors. No one had teased him after that. And that drubbing had won Marlowe's heart, it seemed, for from that day forward, Marlowe had decided to be his bosom friend, the sick bastard. By Cambridge, with Sherbrooke and Marlowe by his side, not to mention having sprouted up to an impressive 6 foot 2 inches tall, he was no longer teased. He was Montford, one of the wealthiest, most powerful aristocrats in the kingdom, even at 18. Of course, behind his back, some braver souls, including Sherbrooke and Marlowe, labelled him the monk, because of some of his more peculiar personal habits that could not be hidden behind any title. He had always been fastidious. What could he say? For instance, he liked his boots shined until they were like mirrors. And when his boots weren't on his feet, he liked them to be lined up in the wardrobe, heels precisely aligned. He had his valet, Coombs, arrange his jackets and waistcoats by colour, black, grey, blue, green, etc., and his breeches by category, a drawer for riding, a drawer for morning, one for afternoon, and one for evening. And he liked his cravats starched, ironed, and tied just so. If he spotted, felt, or suspected a wrinkle, he had Coombs fetch a fresh one immediately. He invariably went through half a dozen by the end of the day, twice that if he'd been out riding about his estates or fencing at his club. He'd given up on Coombs shaving him just to spare himself the anguish of discovering a stray hair mid-morning and Coombs's inevitable tears when his error was pointed out. He therefore shaved himself, and after he was done with his morning ablutions, he made sure that all of his brushes, razors, strops, and bottles, square, not round, were lined up on the table at perfect 90-degree angles. And then there was his desk. His desk was his haven. A more orderly desk in London could not be found. His inkwells, paperweights, blotters, and ducal seals sat in a neat, even row at the top centre, precisely 3 inches from the edge. His stationery sat directly in front of his chair, so meticulously stacked it looked like a single, thick rectangle. He allowed his man of affairs, Stevenage, to sort his correspondence into tidy piles, the bottom right-hand corners aligned. When Stevenage had taken over his position after the retirement of Stevenage the Elder, for he had inherited his job in much the same way Montford had inherited the dukedom, the man had taken it upon himself to align the correspondence just so, revealing a love of detail and order that spoke directly to Montford's heart. Stevenage, suffering from the same obsessive affliction as his employer, was more than happy to put the Duke's correspondence into pristine piles. A pile for estate affairs, a pile for banking receipts, another for House of Lords business, another for his personal correspondence, another for the social invitations he wanted to accept, a very short pile, another for the social invitations he didn't want to accept but was obliged to, a rather large pile, and another labelled miscellaneous, correspondence that, like the oversized books in his library, he'd banished to a far corner, defied categorization, and utterly nettled him. The miscellaneous pile, that pile, nettled Stevenage as well. Montford often caught his man of affairs glancing at it nervously, as he himself did when he thought no one else was looking. Stevenage was, if at all possible, even more concerned with the order of things.